A quarter of a millennium ago, perhaps the most renowned, admired, and beloved composer of classical music was born. All these years later, what makes the work of Ludwig van Beethoven still so compelling? And why, given how different our world is from that of 1770 Germany, are there celebrations around the world for him today? Let's find out. And as is our custom, we'll introduce our guests from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting in Vienna, Austria, with composer Walter Werzowa, owner and head of the audio branding firm Musikvergnügen. In New York, New York, Canadian pianist Lisa Yui, who is an educator at the Manhattan School of Music. And in Weston, Connecticut, there's conductor Peter Oundjian, who from 2004 to 2018 was the music director and maestro for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. And it's great to have you three with us on this auspicious occasion in musical history. Just before we start our conversation, want to throw a few factoids your way, just to set up the discussion to come. Now, according to a website that is the largest classical events finder online, of the 20,000 classical concerts in 2019, more than 13% featured a work by Beethoven. And this made him the top concert composer, followed by two guys named Mozart and J.S. Bach. According to the 2020 Classic FM Hall of Fame survey, based on a 170,000 vote survey, the most featured composers were Beethoven with 17 entries, Mozart had 17, and then Bach and Tchaikovsky rounded up with 15. And finally, when the BBC's Music magazine asked 174 living composers this year to choose 5 of the greatest composers by originality, impact, craftsmanship, and enjoyability, the one that came out on top was J.S. Bach, followed by Igor Stravinsky, and then Beethoven and Mozart, which just goes to show you that 174 living composers don't know as much as 170,000 ordinary voters. That's my 2 cents. Let's get into this. I would love, Peter, I'll start with you. I would love to be able to empirically prove that Beethoven is the greatest ever, not just as a matter of opinion, but as a matter of fact. Is it possible to actually do that?
I don't think so. Fortunately, it's art. It's about creativity, and it's about how we all react to it independently. But there is no question that the music of Beethoven holds within it an unbelievable emotional power and a grasp on us as humanity, which is almost second to none. But on the other hand, if you ask any of us as musicians who is our favorite composer, we're mostly going to say pretty much it's the composer whose music I'm playing or conducting at this moment. Having said that, it would be very difficult, if given the choice to only have one composer to listen to in my life, that I would discard the music of Beethoven, because it is so broad, it's so powerful, and it's so spiritual and so full of consolation.
Right. Lisa, how about to you? Is it possible to prove that Beethoven was the greatest ever?
No, I don't think it is possible to put numbers to art in that manner. But certainly, it's clear from these polls that his music speaks to a great variety of people. And I think that is due to the incredible humanism of his music, and that combines humanity, intellect, and I think more than any other composer in the Western classical music, there is a completeness to Beethoven's music that is almost akin to Shakespeare's plays.
Walter, I wonder whether we have to take into account, when we're trying to consider the greatest of all time, the fact that this man did some of his best work when he could not hear a thing. Surely we have to take that into account, don't we?
We definitely have to. And his composing style changed because of his deafness. And sometimes I think because he was such a powerful man who his world was his own world, and freedom was something so important for him, that he kind of decided internally not to listen to the world, and the world had to listen to him.
Peter, I wonder whether, well, I suspect there's not a good answer to this question, just like the first one was equally as impossible to answer, but let me try anyway. Writing the Ninth Symphony while deaf and suffering from tinnitus as well, I understand, it's hard to imagine a more magnificent achievement in the history of culture, frankly. Is it conceivable that the Ninth might have been even better had he had his hearing?
I think we would probably all argue that That is not the case. I mean, you talk about his deafness and his tinnitus. That began actually very, very early when he was in his 20s still. He was very much aware of this, and it was a tragedy in his life for the bulk of his composing career, actually. Therefore, by the time he wrote the Ninth Symphony just a few years before he died in 1827, he wrote it probably 1823, 1824, we would think. He had written literally hundreds of pieces of music virtually without being able to hear them. And my sense, in fact, is that the fact that he couldn't hear actually allowed his imagination to go into places where it possibly otherwise would not have gone. And the best case of that would be the Grosser Fugue, which is an incredibly dissonant piece of music. I sometimes wonder whether if he had been able to actually hear it, whether he would have had the daring, the guts to present that to the public. So it's a very interesting subject.
Lisa, can you just follow up on that? How is it possible for somebody to compose something so magnificent when you can't actually hear what you're composing?
There are actually a surprisingly large number of artists who were disabled in a certain aspect, and what comes to mind is Milton, for example. And perhaps there is this idea of becoming more visionary when you lose a certain sense. And in the case of Beethoven, he received from the Broadwood Company the most up-to-date pianoforte. And this was in around 1814 or so. And Beethoven composed his final sonatas on this instrument when he couldn't even hear this piano. But one can imagine, what he imagined he heard. And I think this is part of the reason why the final sonatas are so beyond his time, because he actually imagined the sounds that could be heard and tried to translate this onto a sheet of paper.
Walter, just before I ask you the next question, let me set it up by reading an excerpt from an article in the New Yorker by Alex Ross, who's the music critic there. It goes like this. Beethoven is a singularity in the history of art, a phenomenon of dazzling and disconcerting force. He not only left his mark on all subsequent composers, but also molded entire institutions. The professional orchestra arose, in large measure, as a vehicle for the incessant performance of Beethoven's symphonies. The art of conducting emerged in his wake. The modern piano bears the imprint of his demand for a more resonant and flexible instrument. Listening underwent a fundamental change. To follow Beethoven's dense, driving narratives, one had to lean forward and pay close attention. In the course of the 19th century, dead composers began to crowd out the living on concert programs, and a canon of masterpieces materialized with Beethoven front and center. That's Alex Ross from the New Yorker. Do you agree, Walter, that Beethoven not only was a musical genius, but that he actually changed the way music was done in such a way that even today we continue to perform it more than anybody else?
Absolutely. He was not only an incredible composer, he was an incredible conductor. He was a piano player, he improvised, and a lot of his work came out of that. I would like to only add one thing to the not hearing part. Those geniuses hear the music in the head, and it might be a little bit different to hear it actually in the physical world or in the head. And they pen it down, they write it down as if you can think a sentence and write it down. So those composers often control or check what they've written on the piano, and it goes back and forth. But his scale was so different that he could imagine anything and write it down.
So, Peter, that does harken back to the point you just made, which was he did live for 20-something years where he could hear, so therefore he knew what it was supposed to sound like, right? Fair to say?
Absolutely fair to say. I mean, what I entirely agree with Walter saying that this is one of the most extraordinary things is that many composers in the history of time don't use a keyboard to compose with, and many do use a keyboard, but they can hear everything in their head. I mentioned that only about the Grosser Fugue because it's so daring to do that kind of a thing, that maybe it made him a little bit more free to express himself, that he became such a revolutionary.
And let me follow up with you, Peter, on this one as well, because Alex Ross from the New Yorker also wrote in that same piece, Beethoven's an artist almost too great for the good of his art. And I wanted to sort of dive a little deeper on that and try to understand, how can you be too great for the goodness of your art? What does that mean?
Well, I suppose it's like trying to dance after Nureyev has lived or Baryshnikov has lived. You know, it makes it even more difficult to try to achieve anything. But I mean, for us, I think Beethoven's a great inspiration. But then I'm a performer, not a composer. I think it is very intimidating. And obviously Brahms, for example, said many times that it's incredibly intimidating to try to write a symphony after the greatness of Beethoven. And it took him until he was in his 40s to even dare to present a symphony to the world. So too great, I don't think is possible to say, because it's such a gift to all humanity to have all of that. And I think still today he inspires a great number of composers. In fact, this year, of course, a lot of pieces have been composed in his memory.
Mm-hmm. Let's show this clip coming up here. This is quite extraordinary because the Ninth was performed apparently 112 times in December alone in Japan. They love Beethoven in Japan. But the big annual event that they do for 39 years straight is the performance of the Ninth with a, if you can imagine this, 10,000 person choir singing the Ode to Joy. Boy, what this would be like to be in the hall and hear that. Let's have a look. Sheldon, if you would. Lisa, what are you feeling right this second?
The humanism of Beethoven. I think what makes Beethoven eternal and so very popular around the globe is that his language, what he is expressing, is common to all mankind. There's humor, there's life, there's suffering, there is tragedy, and there's hope. And I believe that Beethoven's music is always life-affirming. And this Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, follows great apocalyptic destruction. But that's never where he leaves us. And I think this is what makes Beethoven's music so appealing to the world.
Lisa, you've performed in Japan, have you not?
I have. I was born in Japan.
Okay. Tell me this, because he's obviously not from there. He's from Germany. Why is there such an apparently powerful connection between Japan and Beethoven?
Well, the Japanese culture, I mean, they love Western music, and it has been an incredibly important part of the culture for many, many years. And I think it's just the strength of Beethoven is so apparent that I think any culture that embraces Western music so fully as the Japanese do will do so with as great enthusiasm. And the Japanese do everything very big.
Right. Well, mind you, Walter, the European Union's official national anthem, if we can call it that, is the Ode to Joy. It is that song, and it's been the anthem since 1972. No words, just the music. Do you think it actually helps all the different nationalities in Europe feel more European?
Yes, it's the context, and music is a lot about context. It's not just the music. And Beethoven was humanitarian, and he wanted to bring all brothers together. And early on, they just found, I think 2 years ago, a letter of his. When he was 17 years old, he already penned out those thoughts of that we should unite and be one. So yes, the whole context around that work embraces it.
Alle Menschen wären Brüder.
Yeah, wir sind alle Brüder. And we have to note that the Fifth Symphony is somewhere in a golden CD going through the universe as the message. So Beethoven is everywhere.
Now, I hate to bring too much politics into this, Maestro Oundjian, but the fact is that spirit of European unification apparently did not hit Great Britain when it came to voting on Brexit last time. So maybe Beethoven is mortal after all?
Yeah, I think they wanted Elgar. I think they were offended that Elgar had not been chosen, probably. Yeah, well, we don't have to get into the subject of Brexit. It's been a bit of a disaster, should we say, in any case. But just to go back for a moment, just to see all those Japanese people, I think most people know that I played in the Tokyo String Quartet with 3 Japanese for a long time. And to see them all singing it so beautifully from memory. And if you notice the one shot of the conductor, he wasn't even beating time because the discipline is so great and the understanding of the music so deep that they didn't even need leadership, really. So that was an extremely moving thing to watch.
I did want to ask you about that because I noticed that too. He wasn't doing anything. He was taking it in. Now you've actually been in his place, obviously. Why do you think he did that?
He knew they didn't need him. And in any case, from that distance, they couldn't really see him all that well. But because once something is going, as it were, the last thing anybody wants, whether they're singing or playing an instrument, is to have somebody beating at them. In fact, if you stop beating, everybody just understands, we're just flowing through this series of phrases or this phrase, and it's very liberating.
Peter, I imagine you've heard the Ninth hundreds, if not thousands of times. And when you get a little excerpt like that, which, you're not there, you're just watching it on a monitor, and it's not the whole thing, it's 30 seconds of it. Does something still happen inside you?
Every time. Totally exhilarating. But that happens with a lot of music. And if I think, at the moment, Beethoven's on our minds. If I go through my head and think of the beginning of the Hammerklavier Sonata or the beginning of almost any of his great works, it's a sense of unbelievable internal joy and gratitude, frankly.
Let me play a bit of killjoy here, and that is, Lisa, I'll put this to you. There has been a debate emerging in some circles of late that Beethoven is, quote unquote, too elitist. And the argument goes that for women and LGBTQ people of color, Beethoven's music is predominantly a reminder of what they would consider to be classical music's history of exclusion and elitism. What do you think of this argument?
This is a very important subject, and as an educator who is really, I'm part of a committee just looking over the curriculum of Manhattan School of Music where I teach. This has been a topic that we have been reflecting all year. First of all, I'm not quite sure what elitism really means in this case. Does it mean that the music is very complex? Well, it's certainly not popular music, and popular music is the purpose of popular music is to be able to be integrated very, very easily. The Beethoven's music is complex. Classical music is complex because it is expressing more complex ideas. And hopefully the results, the outcome that we receive from it will be greater and deeper as well. Is it about the price of classical concerts? Well, I think many sports events or rock concerts cost much, much more. But is it about the exclusivity of certain audiences? That is a problem that we should address. And I think it is important that we start supporting the music of today that is reflective of the composers and the performers of today. And it is true that concert halls and music conservatory curriculums have not really changed over the past 100, even maybe perhaps 200 years. And that's something that we need to address, but that has nothing to do with Beethoven's music. And I think we could, there is space for everything. And so it's not Beethoven's music that we need to blame, but the way that we organize concerts and the prices of concerts and to educate the audience. I think that's the most important thing.
Well, okay, you know what? I'm having a debate with myself here as to whether or not to play this next clip or let the guy who programmed a decade and a half worth of Toronto Symphony Orchestra concerts should have a chance to weigh in on that one. Okay, Peter, why don't you weigh in on that one first? Elitism, what do you say?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Lisa's saying. In fact, for 14 years, I was saying, look, this is too formal. We've got to make people feel more comfortable to come to the hall, feel welcome, because conductors traditionally would walk on the stage, stand on the podium, take a bow, and then turn their backs, and that was the end of that communication. So as most people know who came to a concert, I would always welcome the audience, the listeners, in some way at some point at a concert. And I totally agree. I think it's the context that we've set up and the fact that we don't make it accessible enough to people when they're young. The Toronto Symphony at one time was playing for 100,000 students every single year. That's become more and more difficult with busing and traffic and all the, the 21st century technological developments which prevent people from going places as much. But I think the live music experience it has formalized over the many, many years too much. And even the lack of applause, frankly, which didn't exist in Beethoven's time. Of course, they applauded every movement, and that's how those movements were encored. That didn't make everybody happy all the time because they also talked too much, and so on. But we have to find a way, definitely, to make everything feel more accessible and more comfortable, and understand that we live in the context where there's very popular music, which is almost entirely very tonal, which people love in their millions.
Well, if this next clip that we're about to play is not a manifestation of what the maestro just referred to, then I don't know what is. We all know there's nothing elitist about YouTube, so here comes a clip from YouTube. There's a genre of react channels on YouTube where vloggers react to music they have not heard before. And one of those vloggers goes by the name of Mr. Video. He's from Toledo, Ohio. Here's a clip of him discovering Beethoven for the very first time. Sheldon, if you would.
I saw the Beethoven movie with the dog, and the dog ran to the piano and started playing the piano. And that made me look up Beethoven, and I seen, oh, it's an actual person. I never heard any of the symphonies, so I don't even know what I'm about to get into, honestly. Man. I'm teary-eyed. I don't know what the hell this is doing to me right now. This shit is beautiful. Damn, Beethoven. Okay, so this is the 5th symphony. What is 1, 2, and 3, and 4 like? We gotta get into those too. Damn. Oh man, you close your eyes and this takes you just somewhere else. You let the music touch you.
It doesn't seem to be too elitist, Walter, for Mr. Video. He had the goosebumps going big time there. What do you think?
Beautiful. I wish he was in the audience when Beethoven was performing, and he would have loved him. And this music has so much effect on us, and there are even medical studies what it does to our physiology. It's overwhelming, and I don't buy the elitist statement. I think music is for all of us at any time. And there are more and more concerts where we have more openness and room for enjoying in the moment.
Lisa, do you want to come back at that?
Absolutely. I mean, this video gives me so much pleasure, and it reminds me why I have chosen to be a performer and a teacher. It's because it's not enough for me to simply enjoy this music, and I want to show people what makes it so beautiful and for them to experience that as well. And this is something that I think everyone, all musicians, should really be aiming for, because this is absolutely beautiful.
Well, Lisa, maybe you could follow up by telling us you hear it and you react, as we just saw in that clip, but can you kind of explain to us why the 5th? Why the 9th? Why the Moonlight Sonata? Why Für Elise have lasted so popularly for so long? What is it about those pieces in particular?
If I could tell you, I would make a business out of selling the information to all composers. I think there's a combination of order. He is composing in a very, analyzable form, right? There are certain phrase structures, and there are certain just forms that he's following. And so there's a common language that he's speaking. And then the rest is, of course, mystery, right? And this is why I think computers are never going to compose anything that will be deeply life-changing for us, because the element of mystery and surprise are lacking in these cases.
Well, I wonder if I should I was going to go there later, but since you've jumped into this now, I wonder whether we should do this now. Maybe we should. Walter, Beethoven's 10th Symphony. Yes, I know people are asking me right now, 10th Symphony, what do you mean? He only wrote 9. Well, you're kind of involved in the 10th. Do you want to just explain what all that's about?
Yes, love to. Beethoven, when he was alive, he sketched out motifs for his 10th Symphony. He always wrote 2 symphonies at once and jumped back and forth. And he passed before he could really make the 10th that full work. And there are a couple of snippets and motifs. There are 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars, some are 20 bars. And we started teaching AI how Beethoven composed, and in a very different way. And when Lisa said, it's like I totally agree, and computers themselves won't be able to compose. But imagine you turn a computer into a student, and one of your students, and teach that student all the rules by just listen to the music and feed that corpus. We call it that corpus. And we've done this with Ahmed Elgamal at Rutgers University, and he's this brilliant computer scientist. And the AI learned, deep machine learning, what is in the works. So it took even the essence out there. It took maybe the love sickness. It's like all the emotions which are packed in the music, all that information was taken in by AI. And then AI took those seeds, those motifs, and started composing away. And in the beginning, there were surprises that it didn't really get us. But then the more the AI learned and the more we helped there, I had those goosebumps we just saw in that other video. And it's stunning what is possible with a good student.
Well, let's give our viewers a sense of what you're talking about. Here's 30 seconds of Beethoven's 10th. Sheldon. Okay, Walter, we need to understand how much of that was written by Ludwig van Beethoven and how much was written by machine learning artificial intelligence.
So on this one, he pointed to his Pathetic theme, which he wrote when he was much, much younger, 30 years younger. And but he already changed a couple of notes when he penned the sketch down. He didn't harmonize it. So we had 12 bars of the Pathetic theme, fed it into the AI, and we received this orchestration back.
Wow. Peter Oundjian, we know that humans are no longer the best at playing chess. We're no longer the best at Jeopardy. Are you concerned about what direction this is going in, that we may no longer be the best at composing classical music?
Well, not particularly, because I mean that's a fascinating thing that we just heard. But it is the material of Beethoven, and it's finding the initial motives and the initial ideas that is the most difficult thing, according to most composers. So the AI, I think, won't be able to do that. For me, it's hard to explain because I can't even believe I managed to get on Skype. So it's a world way beyond my imagination. But I think there's something about the human contact and the feeling of human beings creating something and achieving something and then transmitting it to other human beings that will always be of enormous value.
Well, let me put that to Lisa. Would it matter to you, Lisa, if you were playing something that you knew had been created by artificial intelligence as opposed to a human being?
Not very. I mean, if it's moving to me, it's moving to me, and I'm willing to be surprised and evolve with the times. But in the meantime, I think this pandemic has shown us how much we miss live performances. And I think despite all these videos and recordings that we have access to, we miss the sense of the risk and the beauty of the surprises and the human contact. And so I think at least for the time being, we will be still relying on live music by human beings. But if that changes, things change. And I'm always willing to be open to be moved by anything that moves me.
Let's just finish up in our remaining moments here with, we started with a bit of an imponderable question, so it only seems fair that we end with one as well. The culture, Peter, that created Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, that culture no longer exists. Does that mean that we are no longer going to see musical geniuses like them in the future?
Well, I'm not sure which particular culture we're referring to, because obviously there's music in people's homes, and all three of those people were surrounded by music from a very young age. So obviously the times are different. We're talking about centuries later, very different influences and very different abilities also to hear music, because in those days you could only hear music if you played it or sang it. Nowadays, of course, on Spotify, you don't have to have any ability to play anything. You can hear any music you like. So that's changed a lot. But I think essentially in every other way, as far as I can see, it's all the same thing. I mean, if I talk to composer friends of mine, they go through the same kinds of struggles that we imagine that the great composers of the past went through. And it's that human element, it's that struggle to achieve. And we talk about Beethoven, his life was really not pleasant. His father was very tough on him. He would improvise as a young kid, and his father said, "No, stop making things up, play music that I've given you to play." He was always being criticized, and out of that and everything else that happened in his life comes this need, I think, to console the world when he could actually, in a way, personally never console himself. So it's that gift, that kind of longing that I think is still in the minds of composers today and will always be.
I can't tell you how grateful I am to the three of you for celebrating Beethoven's 250th birthday with us here on TVO tonight. Walter, Lisa, Peter, so great to be with you, and may he reign for another 250 years and more.
Well said.
Thank you.
He will. Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.